to be running another webinar with our colleagues from MZN International, not-for-profit international development consultancy. Many of you may have seen over the last few months, been working very closely with them. Really delighted to see Chris again here, and together with his colleague Adewale, who's coming, who works for Synergos, is directly coming in from Abuja, Nigeria today. We're going to explore today the issue of agile organisations and the process by which you make your organisation agile and the critical success factors in that. I know we talked a lot over the last few months about adaptation, agility, and pivoting. It's been the sort of the buzzword of the moment. But what does it mean to be an agile organisation? How do you make it work? So we're going to explore that over the next hour. We're going to ask a lot of questions of you and what you've been doing, how you've been doing it. So looking forward to your participation in this as much as hearing from Chris and Adewale. Just to say, we're recording this. There'll be a recording of this made available to you, as will the slides. If you want to ask questions, do ask questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, not in the chat box. Yeah, really delighted to see you all. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon to you all. Hope you are well. I hope you are just about to go on a nice holiday, or at least a staycation. And I'm delighted that we can today talk about something that is urgent and important, but constructive at the same time, about how we actually change the way we change. And obviously we talked a lot about going agile, and then works a lot in digital transformation and agile transformation. And we also received a lot of comments and emails and messages on social media about that following these and other webinars. So hopefully we can make this clarify a few things today. The session is supposed to be very interactive. I get to that in a second, but first of all, I'm really delighted that we can welcome and that I'm joined today by my colleague in the sector and dare I say dear friend of mine, Adewale, who I had the immense pleasure of working closely with over the last year and a half. Adewale is the Africa Director and the thought leader within the sector on trust building and bridging leadership, and works in Abuja. And he's not only one of the most authentic people I know, but also one of the most stylish, if I may say so. Adewale, do you want to say a few words and say hello?
Well, I want to say good morning to everybody. I don't know what Chris means by most authentic, because there's no competition about that. But I certainly don't think I'm especially stylish. But we'll find out as we speak what everybody is made of, and I look forward to speaking to you.
Fantastic. Right, so this is what we have in front of us today. We are going to briefly talk about what the hell are we talking about. What is an agile organization, just to clarify and make sure that we are all on the same level. And then we are going to very briefly again talk about three things: why to change, what to change, and how to change. Because there's a lot of pub talk about this. I just want to base it, hang it on a few facts. And for each of these three questions, I'm going to provide a quick overview. Then Adewale will give you a sort of personal story about how we're doing this. Adewale's organization and MZN are going through a change process, have done for a year or so. So we can actually hear from the front lines about how it feels, the human side of it, why it's important, so less academic basically. And then it's over to you. There's going to be a quick survey by a tool called Mentimeter. Some of you may know it already. It's very easy. What you will need is, or what is useful, is a second screen. You can also use a second browser window on your computer or a laptop. And I get onto that in a second. And after that, we are quickly going to look at the path forward. Excellent. Now let's have a quick trial session for the participation and the live tool. I need to do some changing around, so please bear with me on this one. I want to try it out with everybody before we go into it. So please do use a phone or a smartphone, of course, or a second laptop, or if you don't have that to hand, use your existing laptop and open the browser window and go to menti.com and enter this code 614929. Could we all try that now, please? There we are. It's clearly working. And what you see here is a very serious question, you know, where I would like to spend more time. In the vineyard, is it illegal to do what? And you can vote here. And we have 8 votes already, as you can see. So since the training is going well, I'm closing it in about 7 seconds. All right, so we have 23, 24, 25 votes already. Thanks, voting is now closed. Don't worry, for the next vote, I'm going to give you more time. Now, I'm going to move on to the next question, which I'm hoping you can give me. Which good book or film can you recommend? Just generally from your experience. And this is an open question where you can just type. So I'm going to give you 1 or 2 minutes to type into that. And then we have tried out both forms. I thought this was a training. Okay, I'm not sure this is a book. Star Wars, yeah, sure. Ooh, 1917, I have not seen that. Les uns et les autres. Okay, I'm going to close that down in a few seconds. Okay, you all seem very comfortable with this tool. We have about 40 or so panel members here, so we have 26 votes. I hope that those who couldn't use it yet will have seen this as a good example of how to use it. Excellent. Okay, now we're going back to the presentation and we start the serious work, but thank you very much for this. I will certainly share that and put that in the presentation so you can maybe have some good holiday reads and holiday watchings as well. Good, back to the PPT. Here we are. So let's just briefly talk about what it is we're actually talking about. We're talking about, lots have been said about what an agile organization is, how agility is required now in these disrupted times. And I just want to hang it on a few very poignant, clear facts so that hopefully demyth some misconceptions. Agile organizations are fundamentally different to traditional organizations for 5 reasons, 2 of which I'm going to mention now before the next question. Number 1, the way they do strategy. We had a webinar on this one before, several months ago. Strategy in an agile organization is Northstar guided, and the localization and the change is very rapid. It doesn't need to go through a formal process of predicting and determining the future by some experience or some fancy analysis, charting a course ahead and then executing it. Agile organizations are basically saying, no, what we can focus on is a shared purpose, a shared vision. We have a North Star, so we have a direction which to go, and we will rally around that, but we will recognize the fact that predicting the future is no longer possible. We have to pivot quite quickly. And we are pouring our resources into coming together over the shared purpose and shared vision, but how local leaders and how individual leaders in our organization execute that goal is absolutely free to them, and we will minimize or completely eradicate the need to approval for this one. So a good idea here, for example, for that, that there are several organizations here who do that already. Patagonia, for example, is one organization. And the structure, therefore, is differently as well. In a traditional organization, and there's many nuances to this one, but in the traditional, there's a hierarchy which controls authority, at least financially, often about hiring. Responsibility is given by appointment. So if you are the director of X, you are directing X. If you're the manager of this project, you're the manager of this project. If you are in admin support there, then you're admin support there. So you appoint people into responsibility, and there is an access authority or an access structure in the information flow. As well. That's, depending on how hierarchical you are, that can take extreme forms. Whereas in an agile organization, there's a very flat structure, not totally flat. There's a premium paid on accountability. So results, activities are shared on an open platform. These platforms are usually very open. The physical offices as well as the virtual work environment is extremely wide. There's no gatekeepers keeping us away from information. So a practical example here would be, why wouldn't we in turn be able to see the quarterly financial results or the CEO's personal development goals? And it is the platform that provides structure in which to work. So the organization provides certain tools from project management to financial management to business development. And in these structures, they are mandated. We work in these platforms, in these structures. That can be online tools, that can be physical offices. Usually they are both. Anybody can lead. And teams form based on what they need. Good. Now, we're going to talk about people and processes after this, but that's very roughly how agile organizations and traditional organizations differ in relationship to strategy and structure. Now let's go over to the Menti. Just 1 second, I've got overlapping screens here. And go to the next one. And you should now see on your phone or your second screen a number of options that I'm sharing here with you right now. I hope you can read this. I couldn't make it any larger. I would love to know from your personal impression about what do you feel are your organization's main change drivers. Select up to 3, and then we have Adewale to share his story about this. Okay, results are coming in. Very interesting. Okay, have 30 votes already. There's a bit of a consensus showing. We've got about 30 seconds left to do that vote. Cool, I think that's nearly everybody. 10 seconds left. Thank you. Okay, that's voting closed. So there's a clear consensus. We have 37 votes. I think that's nearly everybody. Well, except for 10. I do see a clear line here. Most of you think that the biggest reason we need to change are that we can't predict the future, that we need to go agile and pivot towards new things. Closely followed by the similar reason, we just need to adapt faster. And then comes the financial reasons. The traditional donors may withdraw, our income stream is changing basically fast. Our organization is simply too static, too structured, too inflexible, and decision-making needs to be localized. So that's an interesting thing. There are a few people who click others. If you have another reason as well, then I'd like to give you the chance to write that in there, about a minute or so. So here on the question, you can now on your second screen, type in anything you want that you think are good reasons that you want to change. I'm going to give that a minute or so again. Interesting. Okay. Wow, lots of comments. I feel like we kicked the debate here. Wanting to shift the power, legitimacy of Northern NGOs. Engagement. Well, thank you so much. That is hugely interesting to be impact-driven. So we have a lot of points here: legitimacy of Northern NGOs, innovation, be impact-driven. I read up there static, realize new opportunities, be metric-driven, financial reasons again, partner working, and overall growth. That's really fascinating. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Adewale in a sec on this one. About talking about the question why his organization, Synergos, is going on the change towards agile. But the answers we have here, I will copy them into the presentation and then Bond will share them. Going back to the PowerPoint, Adewale, would you like to briefly share your experience about the change journey, about to the reasons and the drive behind Synergos' change?
Well, thank you, Chris, and good morning once again, everybody. So Synergos is a very unusual organization. We are set up primarily to try to make the world a better place, which is not strange to anybody, but to walk through aligning systems between those who have and those who do not have to create a more inclusive world by using trust as a vehicle and convening around trust. We had a massively poor year in 2018 with a crisis of losing some very important and key senior people. We had a new chief executive coming in 2019. And of course, what has happened in that process is that trust has depleted even within Synergos. And so that also aligned with a problem we were having between the fact that we generally have developed an organization where in North America and in Europe, we show empathy to those who are in a global philanthropic society. And we sympathize with people in the so-called South. So we had an head office and a field kind of dislocation within the organization. So we had to change to our viability and option. We had to change to adapt to our changing networks across the world. We had to change to be more responsive to their shifting priorities, the way they communicate, and the demand they want from us to communicate truthfully, and their needs to to see us act with integrity with them and to further our common goals. And we had to change because people expect us to live by our values. Our values changing brought us to being more agile, to becoming one synagogue, speaking with one voice, communicating without hierarchy, without dislocation of resources, and to be efficient.
Thank you.
Chris, I wanted to say something. So.
No, that is absolutely the reasons. I'm looking forward to hear on your next question about, you know, the next question, what are you changing, and the pain points as well. But the reasons are very clear. Thanks for that, Adebayo.
Okay, so what we are changing, we've worked in the past year on shifting our structure and processes to become a flatter organization, to have a very wide leadership pool with very little reporting lines, to create what we're calling clusters of working. The name skips me for the moment. I'll remember in the course of my squads. We call them squads. So squads of people working across different what used to be departments, solving problems and being about solutions, to have common platforms and processes, to have one common account for the entire organization, to have a Northstar of guided principles and platforms. And some of the challenges related to that is that if you understand that you have structures, processes, we have worked on structures and processes, but the challenge is always the dynamics, which is the people. And we are dealing with the challenge of evolving new habits. When you have an organization that was very siloed, people develop different power constituencies and different strategies for getting ahead. Yeah. And you don't overcome that because you have designed a new way of working and talking. Even though people say they're committed to those things, they're not necessarily going to change their habits. And so we are working through that. It's a difficult thing. I mean, a classic example, we used to have a structure where I was responsible for all programs. I'm responsible for Africa and all programs. And I don't mind being associated with Africa, but I smart a little bit by being not acknowledged for being responsible for all programs. These are all human dynamics and human habits. And we are brought up in scarcity models where when you have, someone doesn't have, or when they have, you don't have. So working in an adaptive, agile process requires us to be more open to these changes. However, we are seeing some things already happening. We were fortunate to have started this before COVID occurred. Having started this before COVID occurred, it put us in a very strong place to adapt to COVID-19. So we've been going through what everybody is going through, rationalizing our costs, but it's not affecting our staff so far because we have been able to pull together our resources and work at a distance to manage the cost implications and to manage the effects on us. We're hoping that we are going to be able to adapt more effectively as we get used to these circumstances we're facing. Just one point, Chris. I realize, and I think my colleagues are beginning to realize, there's no new normal. This is what we're going to have to do. This thing is not going away. We're going to fundamentally change. We're going to fundamentally reposition ourselves. And change is not a process, it's life. So we're going to have to be willing to change as is necessary. And so being agile gives us good.
Perfect. Are you still there? Your connection was just...
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, I kept quiet.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Change is not a process, it's life. You answered this question as well, which is great. So we move on with this. But thank you so much for that. I look forward to the next one. I've got one more question of you after this. I want to mention the process and the people already. And this is, let me just talk about less from the immediate work we do with synagogues, which I'm very pleased to do, but already we are changing the processes, and obviously culture follows processes a lot. So we are changing the platforms, the workways with Synergos, for example, and others together, and then over a while the habits are changing. But this is what it looks in a nutshell. Processes in an agile organization are focused more on rapid decision making, where metrics are king or queen. The metrics is what decides. So it's very evidence-based management. In a traditional organization, by contrast, the processes are more directed and determined by those in charge. And new work is done within existing structures. You know, you have a department for this, you have a silo for that, you have an expert on this, and that's where new work is done. Which, if you think about it, it's just only works if the new work isn't actually new. And the most processes are leader-driven or insight-driven. Someone in the organization has a lot of experience, a lot of charisma to translate the process, how to get something done, and or does base it on some fancy analysis. Whereas an agile organization, it pays a premium on failure, it pays a premium on rapid experiment. As fine. There is a standardized way of working on the standardized platform. So how we work is standardized. It's not a free-for-all, but the standardized platforms of working are performance orientated, very metric driven. I can work for myself. My colleagues around the world, they look at my personal development goals. They look at our monthly financial inputs. They look at who we are hiring. They're involved, or they're free to access at least every interviewee process, every bid we send out, every client report we do with our 50 or so clients around the world at the moment. And some pitch in, some don't pitch in. They know which analysis, which process, and that helps. Is that newcomers to our organization are a little, the onboarding is very extended, but it works. People are therefore managed differently as well. There's a premium paid on what I call the passion lead. It doesn't matter who is actually the most smart about this, but who's got the most passion for something. So the dynamic is key. In a traditional organization, you have authority leadership, appointed responsibility, sort of formalized steps, whereas in an agile organization, leadership considers itself to be a servant to the organization. I have the tool as MD of NZN to provide my colleagues with the platform, the insight, and my personal take on strategy. I do not have the responsibility to tell my colleagues how to do their job. So there's a premium paid in agile organizations on entrepreneurial drive. There's a huge amount of role mobility. There's absolutely no reason why a 20-year-old intern couldn't lead the project. If she thinks that's great, then fantastic. You know, it's going to be performance driven and metric measured every week anyway. That is basically the way to work. So back to you. I've got two more questions. What do you feel needs to change in your organization? You told me why you change. I'd love to hear from you now what needs to change. And I've given you a number of choices. There's still the option of clicking other and then typing into the next slide. But back on your screen on menti.com, enter the code. Please let me know what you think are the major areas in your organization that need to change. And I think you can choose up to 5 options. You don't have to, but you can choose up to 5. Okay, interesting. There's a consensus emerging around information flow already. You've got about 40 seconds left. Yeah, we're nearly at 40 votes. Can we get to 40 votes? Who hasn't voted yet? We've got 20 seconds left. This is stressful, isn't it? Okay, last chance. You're done. Okay. Average number of reasons, but the top one is information flow, needs to flow better in the information. And that is actually, one of the top reasons when the first inquiry comes into my colleagues or me, where they say, hey, we have a lot of information. There's a famous saying, if only we knew what we knew, then we'd be a lot better off. Agile organizations have a habit of, maybe not fixing it, but certainly addressing towards it there. The next one is you want to really change the way HQ relates to each other. That's certainly something that an Agile organization is paid a premium on, because there is not going to be an HQ anymore in an Agile organization. The other two that people have voted for is we have far too many bottlenecks in decision making. It takes too long. Well, we have certainly seen that in this crisis. Organizers as well have lost extremely precious amount of time to even put statements out for the last few crises, and we need to be more entrepreneurial. Absolutely agreed. Some of you have clicked other, you may have some other votes as well, so I would invite you to type in whatever you feel about what needs to change in your organization into the free text. Capability to change doesn't match ambition. That's a very interesting one. More humility, yeah. Yeah, you silo way of working, metric-driven work, digital, less gatekeepers. Yeah, mindset change. Oh, very interesting. Traditionally, the third sector has operated at a slower pace. That needs to change. That does not work in a dynamic environment. Yeah, again, more about being humble. Well, is very, very vocal about this. I completely agree. Matrix structure, that's very 90s, isn't it? We've got about 20 seconds left, ladies and gentlemen. Mike, I hope you're not running over time too much. Okay, 10 seconds. What role does HQ have? That's an interesting one as well. Too many reporting layers, yeah. Fantastic, thank you so much. Again, what a debate. Thank you ever so much. You certainly are very active. That's fantastic. I see too many reporting layers, power dynamics, being humble, digital first, being far more getting a really global mandate that needs to adapt better. The structure, we've tried moving over to a matrix structure, and that didn't really work. So that's all very, very good, very, very, very interesting. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the last slide, and then we hear one more time from Adewale in a second. And that is about how we actually change. So we discussed what needs to change. We discussed why we need to change before that. And I just want to briefly say, okay, that's great, but how do we change? And some of you might have seen this particular one. And obviously, change can be instigated by one or more of any of the factors we are aware of. Shocks like COVID, or like instant events like Black Lives Matter movement that is well overdue, or any other things. There are trends as well, large significant trends, much harder to spot. It's a bit like the frog sitting in boiling water or jumping into it. There are trends which fundamentally the way we work and relate with each other. Digital is one. When I started Amsterdam in 2014, going digital was a nice to have. Right now, programs and development programs digitally. So that's a trend that is absolutely major, and it has passed another threshold this year. Mission changes, or the failure to adapt the mission, and the environment changes as well. So these things are stimulus for change, but the type of change is often reactionary. We are driven by this, and very often we change out of necessity, and that's not always the best methodology, I would say. I would really strongly encourage everybody in the world, including my own organization, my colleagues, to drive our own change and not be driven by it. To be change happy, that is enacted because it's designed to be emotionally extremely painful, but it gets more painful when we do it as a reaction rather than as a choice. It's a bit like going to the gym. Change that is designed to position the organization to support a strategy in a better place rather than just to overcome a hurdle is again immediately more motivating. And we do want the change that is driven towards the future, not driven by some events in the past. And that is a fundamental point, the last one, that I can't stress enough. If we are changing our organization because something happened, we are always reactionary. We are always updating to catch up. And restructuring projects have a habit of, particular restructuring consultants, I must admit, have a habit of saying, if only we do this and spend the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years doing that, then we'll be in a happy place. And I would say there is no, we are happy if we are this. There needs to be a continuous improvement, the human preparation and an emotional preparedness. So some of you may have seen this, this by now well published and shared graph we've come up a couple of years ago. This is obviously not an exact science, but if you think about change, you can think about it in two areas. You can think about it as a rapid change project, or you can think about it incremental. And the time to achieve the change is obviously longer if you do it incrementally. But the disruption and the cost to the organization is much more if you do it rapidly. And I would say, I can maybe mention this, about the pain points and about what's gone well, what hasn't gone well on Synergos. But largely, you can do organizational restructurings. They're often financially driven. They are throwing the baby out with the bathwater often. They are massive restructurings, cost intensive, time intensive, and frankly a little bit hurtful emotionally. There's change in office, change a program delivery, or change in organizational function, finance, programs, HR, whatever. And then there's these limited scope changes where we say, hey, we just want to, cross-function, become more digital. Then there's change that I would entitle organizational change capacity building, where we say we need to have the ability to do this. This is where a transformation to agile comes in, I would say, followed by a more willingness and a systematic way to check, are we still suitable, and action this. This is where the metrics driven comes in. We've written lots about change. I want to hand over to a real life example to Adewale, and the last question to you. Head over to the blog on Amsterdam where we've written extensively on how to change, what to change, if to change. And Adewale, can you maybe give us Europe, the 2 cents worth Europe review? How's the change so far? What's gone well and what's the pain point, maybe? The good, the bad, the ugly, so to speak.
Well, I think I've set it up, so I'm going to go to what I think is the real difficult and perhaps real one that we cope badly with,
Yeah.
and not just synagogues. And what I mean by that is that we are often blinded by what we know to what we don't know. And the thing that we never know is human beings, their habits, their choices, their dynamics. Because unlike any other system, human beings can say, they might be the last people to know why they're saying what they're saying. So what do I mean by that? We have a built-in ways that we commit to change and we disrupt change. It's called immunity to change. So many of us have done that in different ways. We say we're going to lose weight, we sign up to a gym, but then within a month or so, we're doing the opposite. And there's a reason for that. It's not bad or good, it's just human beings, we disrupt ourselves. And Professor Keegan and I've written extensively about that, and it's a very beautiful way to learn about change. It's a similar kind of dynamic. We have an express commitment to change, but we have immunity to change because there are habits of behaving that are deeply embedded. An organization of 30 years does not get there without embedded systems and dynamics. And it has to be surfaced because the easiest thing to do is the technical changes. Put the systems in place, put the processes in place. But then here comes the adaptive change. But luckily for us, I think fortunately for us, COVID-19 is a call. So whether we like it or not, we must change. Everybody who's out there looking for a grant at the moment knows that it's really close to impossible. Everybody out there looking for a way of being does not know how they're going to come out of this process. It's adapt or die. And that, I hope, is going to be a strong motivator for us to have the authentic conversation we need to have internally. The people who are playing games would have to come to realization that they're going to lose their jobs one way or the other, and things are going to happen. And I'm very glad about that because we are going to have to be innovative to survive. And that's a good thing.
Amazing, Adewale. You do know how to put it. And they call me blunt. You know? You're absolutely right. And I'm so grateful that you're here. That's speaking it straight from the front line. And obviously, Amsterdam and Synagogue, halfway through this journey right now. It's really, really good to hear that. Now I want to hear from you one last time, or actually 2 more times. So I've got another question for you. Know how you need to change. Give me your impression about whether you need a deep and big organizational restructure. Do you need to change just certain departments? Is there a small change only? Do you just need to add some capacity, and or do you want to run some corrective action only? Okay, go ahead. We have some results already. "23 votes are in." This is obviously only a single vote, so it goes a bit faster. "23 votes are in, and so far you are erring on the side of we need to develop certain organizational capacities continuously. It's gaining ground. Okay, I'm going to start the clock with 30 seconds. "31 votes in out of close to 50 participants. Voila, there we are. As you can see, most of you think that you need to start developing certain organizational capacities continuously. So there's an emphasis on continuous improvement. What Adewale said, this change is constant. Then there is a, not insignificant number who say we need to complete and deep and restructure, as well as changing certain functions and systematically checking performance, but there's no immediate change need. Okay, so the vast majority of people who voted, over 50%, say that there is a continuous development and change process. Then institutionalized. Is there the capacity within the organization to continuously evolve? And if not, that means that will be your first starting point. Right, last question. When do you want to kick this off? Now, certainly, get it done before Christmas, or at least get it started before Christmas. The next, it doesn't matter. Okay. Going to give it 30 more seconds. At the moment, we have a tight race between the next 12 months and urgently right now. I think that's pretty clear. That is... Ooh, this is exciting, at least for a German accountant. All of you say it needs to happen pretty soon. That's really interesting for me. So I think your urgency has translated here very well. Thank you for that. That is pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope we are roughly within time. Maybe we can do the Q&A 5 minutes longer than originally scheduled. I really enjoyed this. Adewale, thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate it. I'm sure people have questions for you. If you want to stay on and answer these questions, I also want to thank Bond again for convening this group. Much appreciated. And then finally, I think any questions you might have, let me know.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Adewale and Chris. That's really fascinating. And there's sort of two groups of questions really here. One is the people question. One is the big question about pivoting, the danger of swinging agilely to one thing, swinging agilely to the next. How do you ensure? This is essentially a question from Catherine Morango, who's encapsulated it here. How do we ensure balance as we undertake change to avoid a situation where the organisation is constantly changing the next big thing or trend?
Maybe you can answer that as well. I would just simply say, mirror what Adewale has said. This change is constant, and the change is being institutionalized as a continuous rollout, not as these big disruptive, hurtful changes that lose people's jobs and frankly their mental health as well. There is no, Adewale, you said it, we need to change. It has always been true, and that has never been truer today. What we can't do is continuously be consumed by change. So that's why I tried to say, let's institutionalize the measurement of how we're doing and do this corrective. We have an increasing number of clients, by the way, who keep us on as I call them internally the keeping honest engagements, where we measure their performance, but we just report back, sending a monthly or 6 weekly report card, and they get very accurate, near real-time information about how the projects are performing, how many check-ins were late, how many bids have been submitted, and whatever metrics they are choosing themselves. And that means that you would expect a continuous flow of corrective actions, restructure, teams reforming throughout the year without it throwing out the best
time. I actually think that I have on a tangent to this.
Yeah.
So change is constant, but if you see change as play rather than work, it shifts your understanding of it. So you don't have to get it perfectly right. But the first thing is to be honest about what is going on. So when you have changes that you don't finish, quote unquote, and you're dropping, there's a dynamic in the organization that has to be surfaced. What is really going on? Human beings always do things for a reason. The community reacts in a particular way for a reason. So it's best to know that, not generalize about it, but understand it. Is it a special cause, or is there a root cause in the organization that's playing that out? Once you understand it, then it's easier to find solutions to play. And it doesn't mean because you have to know the reason why you do it. Experiment with ways in which you can choose changes that might work. But there's no hardwire for this. It's a process.
Thank you. I'm just going to take a different tack. There's a couple of questions here. There's one from Penny Lawrence. I mean, I think your idea of the squad, Adewale, really, really captured the imagination here. Penny says, "I'd love to know how you changed mindsets, Adewale." And then Felicity Jones has said, the squad approach is interesting as a move from working group, which I feel is often used in organisations who want some of this without structural change in practice. Have you adapted job descriptions, also staff training? Have you faced challenges in terms of global teams and different cultural responses to flatter hierarchy? Can you just give us a bit more of that human you talked about so eloquently?
I try to write some things in the answers. I don't know whether they show up. Actually, there are about 4 questions you pulled together there.
Yeah.
So I think the first one was about squads working. And the squads are very, very interesting things because they don't form automatically. But you can look at them as solution centers. People who are passionate about an issue that's come up in the organization come together and find a squad around what solutions can work. And oftentimes they bring out external partners to create a solution. And some of them can be potential founders. So they're in at the ground floor in developing a solution. On the mindset thing, you don't do to people, you don't change their mindset. You hope that they change their mindset. And the difference is that people can say. So the most you can do is create a space for people to express themselves honestly and be able to, let me put it a different way. What we get wrong in synagogues often is that we're nice people. We're not kind people. There's a difference between the two. And I've said this oftentimes. We're always trying to be nice and polite to each other, but we don't deal with the fundamentals of what we're being polite about. And so we need to get into a space where we can have honesty and kindness, where people say, okay, I understand why you have this position and I disagree or I agree with you. That does not mean I don't like you as a person. And that kind of deep humanity is what we all need in our organization. So I think that when people trust that you really care about what you're talking about and you're not playing a game, I think they're more open to work with you.
And I would just, I completely agree. And just to add to that, my role as a consultant is to design the platform and give people lower the bar as possible to join any squads possible, any squads they want to join, or just be informed by them and contribute at times where they are. The point is passion, and the point is evidence. if you're passionate about something, if you want to get involved into project X, Y, Z, or if you want to start something in your organization, the bar to do so should be extremely low. The way to do so should be very clear. Go on this internet, click here, kick it off. You need to provide certain information within the first 14, 30, 65 days. Otherwise, it's an automatic fail or dissolution, or it's been assigned a budget either internally or externally done. That could be externalized even. That's really exciting about what Synagogue is doing. And then let people rally around that. And it doesn't matter whether the CEO likes it or whether it's not part of the immediate strategy, or whether the very charismatic vocal new hire has a different experience and it's all changed again. If the metrics say that project works, then that's what works. Metrics are king. I tell you what, there are some projects within Amsterdam, I have no idea about them, but I see the daily or monthly metrics and they look good, so it continues.
Thanks, Chris. This sort of the next question sort of picks up on that slightly. I don't know whether Maria is asking for the impossible, but she says many of us are not in positions to affect the whole organisation. So, what's your advice to individuals, teams, or small groupings within organisations who would like to be more agile in a less agile organisation? Don't tell the CEO. Is that the answer?
Well, look, we work with some extremely traditional organizations, where the power structures internally and externally are certainly based on appointees, sometimes even generational. I also found a similar, we work with a lot of philanthropist organizations, and I know you do as well. And the guiding or the kicking philanthropists who started this all off is extremely powerful in terms of I do this, I do that. I would only say you have two choices. You can either stay true to yourself and speak truth to power and communicate the change, or leave. I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but if you're in an organization that you can't be true to yourself, I think it's healthier and time in there.
Chris, you have the fortunate situation of being a consultant. My suggestion would be to try to find a space to try a squad.
Yeah.
Just find what in your organizations allows you to have a small grouping of interested people to experiment with the idea and take one single thing that you're all passionate about and try and see whether you can get, and it helps if you can get someone who could fund it, engage in it. And if you came up with something that brought money to the organization, we need to go to. It's a tough time to be out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, in my experience, you can often find allies for your ideas. And if you can find more than another person to talk things through, start to develop the idea and find the right people in the organisation to sort of progress the idea. I think that in a way that creates its own squad. I think you get a sort of a rationale for doing something which can in some cases become unstoppable in some respects, and is taken on because the arguments have become so strong for doing something in a particular way.
Absolutely, and I think Chris can help. If you send him a note, he's a good guy. He'll try and find a way to give you advice too.
Well, I'm not sure about
that. Just a bit of a clarification on. Can you just explain in more practical terms what a Northstar-based strategy looks like if you don't have clear plans? Many of us have broad missions which could lead to mission creep and diluting impact if we don't have a considered strategic plan. This balancing of the kind of external context changing so rapidly, having a strategy and the North Star, how does that matrix of possibilities fit together?
Yeah, sure. Again, Adewale is in the middle of this process. So I would describe it as simply, you want to keep the strategy as wide as open. So if you have a strategy that experiences a lot of creep and a lot of adaptation, then that sounds like you are too wide. It's a bit like these company slogans. You could probably copy paste them to a lot of companies, and then there you are. So be clear about what you want to do where, but have it wide enough to be flexible in where you work and in which arena you work. So it should be a guide, not a dedicated, we will do this at September 2021. Yeah, this is the guide. Now, that's quite right. On the other side, the how you work, that's quite strict. I mentioned these platforms, saying, I mentioned the Amazon platform earlier as well. If you start something within Patagonia, within Spotify, within 2 or 3 other clients where we work with right now, we've completed transformations. If you want to do something that is, it needs to kick. You need to confirm that it aligns to the Northstar. It's usually just a checklist. You click online, and you need to deliver results or first results within a given time frame. So the channel through which you go is quite structured. If you want to kick something off that you're keen about, you need to flesh it out within 14 days. You need to have formed a squad within 30 days. You need to have obtained a budget, either internal or external or both, within 90 days or 60 days or whatever the timeline is. Could be 6 months for slow-moving organizations. So that is quite structured. So the Northstar is a guide. The how is fairly channeled, fairly structured, and this is the way we work this. You can't just endlessly debate about an idea for one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting. If this has no progress, the system will force it into the bin.
Great.
Does that help?
That's great, thank you. And I think, and we're just running over time slightly, just comment from Janet Riley said earlier, Christian, you said that the matrix structure was very 90s.
Sorry.
Can you elaborate?
No, I mean, it really is. It's, are we going back to lean manufacturing as well? That's early 90s, late 80s. The matrix structure in general management science or management studies has been found useful for organizations that produce a standardized good, but want to evolve that good over time. For service organizations, advocacy organizations that need to rapidly change what they do and where they do it, the matrix organization just ends up in a massively overflown inbox and direct reports. Adewale has referred to squads. We usually recommend that a member of staff is a member or a leader of no more than 5 or 6 squads, because that's about all the direct reports you can reasonably take. The matrix organizations, as far as if you read the common management science, tend to overburden everybody with reports, because you are literally in a matrix getting reports from left, down, upper, and under. And it forms into a massively flow. But I appreciate that is still very present in many organizations. The GIZ in Germany has kickstarted a change project in 2011 to move towards a matrix structure, and last year abandoned it because it is an absolute disaster, and they are now thinking about squad-based agility as well. So even though the slow, large organizations like GIZ are getting onto it.
Thanks, Chris. I think we need to wrap up there, but that was really fascinating session. Thanks so much, Adewale, so much